Thank you, Alexander Gustafsson. You made me a better man and fighter tonight.
Honor, dignity, and respect are the fundamental values of martial arts, aren't they? Not entirely, and definitely not in modern-day mixed martial arts, where showmanship, rivalries, and bad blood between fighters sell tickets. Fighters disrespecting one another and even dragging families through dirt is a norm now.
I just hope he shows up because I know his mama got tickets, so...
Don't talk about my mom for one. Don't you ever talk about my mom.
Because negative publicity is still publicity at the end of the day. So, in today's video, we take a look at the most disrespectful moments in UFC history. Nate Diaz versus Donald Cowboy Cerrone. The Diaz brothers often come across as harsh and offensive because they take no prisoners when it comes to fighting. You disrespect them and they'll stalk and slap your brain cells out, even if you are a legend and an icon like Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Now, Cerrone can be a mean machine at times as well, but when he battled Nate Diaz in a lightweight contest at UFC 141, he took the role of the good guy. Cerrone first approached Diaz 4 months before their fight in order to greet the Stockton native, but for some odd reason, he was met with a slap on the hand and profanities. Later, during one of their face-offs, Diaz knocked his foe's cowboy hat off his head with a slap after Cerrone made a verbal jab. In the cage, Cerrone again provoked Diaz by flipping him off as the referee gave instructions.
At this time, you can touch gloves. Or not.
I love it, Herb. Great ad-lib. Or not.
In response, Diaz produced one of his finest career performances by putting on a boxing clinic against his arch-rival, and by the end of the second round, Cerrone was mentally and physically broken, and then given a double bird.
Asking for 5 minutes of hell. Look at this.
That's about as...
Luckily, the two buried the hatchet a few years later.
At 202, I went up and talked to Nate and Nick, both of them. And I said, hey man, this shit's got to stop.
Michael Bisping spits in opponent's corner.
Sounds like I know that I'm going to knock him out. You've ever read. Conceive, believe, achieve. Shut the up.
Michael Bisping is as sophisticated as a broadcaster should be on the mic these days because that's part of his job. But back when he was fighting, he was a force to be reckoned with in the world of pre-fight trash talking.
Come on, George, you got some money, man. Buy a new suit, what the fuck, you look like a history teacher.
Bisping's smack talk was creative and funny, and he rarely lost his cool.
Are you intoxicated? Are you intoxicated? What was the question, Ariel?
Except when George Rivera brought the worst out of the count in the lead-up to their fight at UFC 127.
You ever met my friend Bisping? He's the biggest dick in the whole wide world. He's a mean old dick and he has to...
Rivera most notably mocked Bisping in a hilarious satirical video. Bisping didn't like the taste of his own medicine and entered the octagon with mean intentions. As good as Rivera was with his cringeworthy pre-fight antics, he couldn't hold a candle to Bisping in the cage. Bisping first smacked him with an illegal knee.
Yep, no doubt about it. On 2 knees, Joe.
And then beat him from pillar to post, putting him out of his misery. After stopping Rivera in his tracks, Bisping was seen spitting in his opponent's corner. When asked why he disrespected the opposing team like that, this is what Bisping said, and I quote, "I was spitting at the floor to let them know what I thought of them." Fair enough, Mike. Colby Covington calls Brazilians filthy animals. Up until 2017, nobody except for the hardcore ones knew who Colby Covington was. He was just another fighter trying to make a name for himself in the UFC welterweight Shark Tank until his life took a 180-degree turn. The story goes something like this. Covington was told by the UFC that he was pretty boring and that they'd release him unless he blew them out of the water. Then came his trip to Brazil, where after defeating Damian Maia, he unleashed venom on Brazilians in attendance and those watching around the world.
I should have knocked him out! Brazil, you're a dog! All you filthy animals suck!
Covington turned into one of the UFC's greatest heels that night, and the change had evident repercussions. For instance, he had boomerangs thrown at him by Brazilian UFC heavyweight Fabricio Werdum. The funny part is that Colby pressed charges against the Brazilian for that. Ain't that a coward move? I'll let you be the judge on that one. Then his former best friend and roommate turned his back on him.
You smile, little bitch. I can't wait to break those fake teeth. You're such a dog.
He was also kicked out of the American Kickboxing Academy, but as long as he's making millions, meeting Donald Trump whenever he wants, and getting title shots every now and then, he's cool with the way things are going for him. More power to you, Colby. George Masvidal's super necessary antics. Ben Askren was one of the UFC's best signings in recent years, despite the fact that he ended up with a losing record. Askren's tendency to boom roast welterweight contenders spiced things up to a great extent in an otherwise boring division.
Nick Diaz, you're so high you tried taking a nap in the octagon. Boom, roasted.
Wow, really? I love it!
From calling Kamaru Usman Marty from Nebraska to showing up at UFC press conferences in flip-flops, Askren's short stint in the promotion was highly entertaining for everyone but George Masvidal. Heading into their welterweight clash at UFC 239, Askren aimed quite a few jabs at Gamebred. In all honesty, Askren's smack talk was lighthearted, but for the brawler from the mean streets of Miami, it was despicable and worthy of punishment. So when the two entered the cage for an iconic showdown, Masvidal knocked Askren out within 5 seconds and then proceeded to add a couple of super necessary punches that weren't all that necessary in truth.
They get the fight clock is brought to you by Modelo.
Masvidal then mocked Askren by pretending to fall to the canvas the funky way. Well, Askren talked all this trash talk, and at the end, he paid the price in a very disrespectful way. Israel Adesanya mocks Alex Pereira's son. Israel Adesanya jumped up to the #1 spot in pound-for-pound rankings for the pettiest MMA fighter on the planet when he mocked Alex Pereira's 12-year-old son, Alessandro, to settle an old score. Back when Izzy and Puttin were kickboxers, the Brazilian knocked the Nigerian New Zealander out cold in the rematch of 2017. Alessandro, who was 7 years old at the time, imitated Adesanya's knockout in the ring, smashing his head with a plastic bottle and pretending to fall unconscious. What goes around, unfortunately, comes around, and sometimes bigger and better. So after Adesanya knocked out Alex Pereira to reclaim his middleweight title at UFC 287, he pretended to fall to the canvas unconscious after pointing at Alessandro in the crowd. The child appeared to be in tears at his father's defeat, and naturally, Adesanya was criticized for holding a grudge against a child. Adesanya couldn't care less about the criticism. Conor McGregor's brutal trash-talking versus Khabib. Conor McGregor is the Sun Tzu of psychological warfare. He is notorious for mentally breaking his opponents down pre-fight before putting them away with his deadly left hand when the lights shine the brightest. So many legends of the fight game, including Dustin Poirier and Jose Aldo, fell into his trap. With the passage of time, McGregor's trash-talking started to lose its sheen. So in an attempt to bring back the good old days, heading into his lightweight title fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov at UFC 229, the Irishman crossed lines he shouldn't have. McGregor launched a venomous attack on Khabib's religion.
They called his father a quivering coward. Which him and Kadyrov were at a mosque together, and he posted a picture.
McGregor attacked his father. He attacked Khabib's manager.
Shut your mouth. Ali Abdulaziz, mad terrorist. Terrorist snitch. I know a lot about you as well, you mad rat.
The Irishman even went as far as offering him his proper 12 Irish whiskey, which was quite disrespectful considering that the Eagle is a devout Muslim who doesn't drink.
Happy birthday, Shine the Bus.
I don't drink.
Why don't you drink?
I don't drink.
Why don't you drink?
I never drink.
I'll tell you some booze at parties.
I never drink.
You're mad backwards.
McGregor's pre-fight trash-talking wasn't just disrespectful, it was dark. Khabib knew he was never going to win a war of words with the Irishman because of language barriers, but even if he was fluent in English, Khabib wouldn't stoop so low. The Eagle decided to do his talking inside the cage at UFC 229 when he smashed McGregor's face in with vicious ground and pound in the second round.
Oh, massive ground strikes here. Herb watching closely.
Khabib is trying to smash his face.
McGregor forced to just cover up.
Whether McGregor was trying to strategically gas Khabib out by blocking his punches with his face is still up for debate, right, Dominic Cruz? Ultimately, Khabib choked McGregor out in the 4th round of their fight.
There's the tap! Still undisputed! Khabib!
Jumped over the fence and drop-kicked McGregor's teammate Dylan Dennis to settle more scores. Khabib's split-second mistake caused a massive brawl between the two teams. The entire event was chaotic. Bonus: Max Holloway teaching Brian Ortega defense mid-fight. Max Holloway is the kind of guy to disrespect you respectfully. The Hawaiian is one of the nicest people in the fight game until he enters the cage. That's when he unleashes his fists of fury on his opponents and makes them feel like they're random dudes from the street. He is so dominant against everybody not named Alexander Volkanovski that it's low-key very disrespectful. When Holloway put his featherweight title on the line against Brian Ortega in 2018, he beat the Mexican-American from pillar to post and absolutely smashed T-City's pretty face into an ugly and gruesome sight. While the constant punishment was disrespectful in itself, midway through the fight, Holloway grabbed a hold of his opponent's arms and taught him that blocking punches with his granite chin wasn't doing well on the judges' scorecards. The former champ treated Calvin Kattar pretty much the same way. Leave the 450 significant strikes alone, the way Holloway dodged Kattar's punches in bunches while looking in the other direction is pound for pound one of the most disrespectful moments in UFC history. So, these were some of our most disrespectful moments in UFC history. What is your most disrespectful moment in UFC history? Which ones would you like to see in another video? Let us know in the comments section below, and we might make it for you. And before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn those notifications on so you won't miss any of our content. Until the next one, peace out.